I'll be talking a little bit about Ethereum scaling. And so, of course, we're here today broadly to talk about agentic finance. And for the most part, many people would like to see that happen within an open and permissionless environment. Now, invariably, we'd like to see that on Ethereum. But is Ethereum ready for it? We'll see. My background, I come from traditional finance. So I started off as an FX option trader, a vol trader. It was in the early kind of 2000s, pre and post GFC. I was with Morgan Stanley in the financial engineering and credit group. And so has anyone seen The Big Short movie? Yeah, so there's a scene where Selena Gomez is, I think she's making a bet on someone else who's making a bet on someone else who's at the craps table. So she would have been in my team at the time. But so I'm intimately concerned and interested in kind of market construction. In the early 2000s, the derivative markets really proliferated at that time, as well as the credit markets in general. Of course, the credit markets blew up in Lehman times, and so it was one of those things where I didn't dream of that being my future, and so I pivoted into tech. So here we are. I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing. Now, I won't talk about the AI agent stuff. The agent stuff, you guys have kind of already seen this stuff broadly, but on Ethereum, we're already seeing a number of transactions being run by agents, and for the most part, basically every hedge fund, every trading firm is using agents in multiple capacities. Now, Ethereum, as this broad, open, permissionless environment, it's incredibly slow. It's uncertain. You might be trying to land trades on Ethereum, and it may or may not happen within a 12-second interval. And so when you have agents trying to execute an action, let alone communicate with other agents through some type of coordination, it's very difficult to work within a probabilistic environment, so to speak. Finally, the last point here is MEV. And for those who are not familiar with this, this is called maximum extractable value. And so what happens is that on Ethereum and any blockchain, there is this ability to front run or manipulate other people's transactions. And it's just the way the blockchains are kind of built. You have this mempool which collects transactions. You can see what's there, and so you'd think, well, here is BlackRock or someone going to do $1 billion trade. I'll pay a little bit more to go ahead of them, to front run them. So this is part of the current fabric within Ethereum and blockchains. And so agents as well are, to some degree, quite predictable. And how can we kind of avoid these this environment? And so it starts with Blockspace. And Ethereum does one thing, and it sells Blockspace. That's its primary product. It is high-grade Blockspace. Of course, there's many other blockchains, but many people just don't use them, and so that would be low-grade Blockspace. Now, if you fast forward to 10, 20 years from now, when there are hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars on Ethereum, this fabric, this block space that Ethereum sells is effectively like a scarce asset. Wars will be fought over this asset to basically control a part of the global economy and the fabric that all the financial rails are on. And so we created this ability to trade Ethereum's block space as a commodity. And so that's where a lot of this started. So I'll talk a little bit about how blocks are actually made on Ethereum. We're getting kind of deep into the pipeline and the process behind it, but stay with me. So for the most part, I call this a boring 12-second block. You basically, you try to land a trade, and literally you just wait 12 seconds. And it may or may not happen, and it may or may not happen in the next block as well, and it's very frustrating. Trades basically are broadcasted to some degree within an open environment and some within a closed environment. But they basically, you put the trades out there, you just wait and wait for more trades, and then at some point, poof, it just makes it into the block. So it's kind of frustrating. There's a lot of uncertainty around the process, but this is the current process to create trades on Ethereum. And so the whole point here is that if we're going to have agents with microtransactions and, instead of investing or trading large sizes, but really small sizes in high velocity, we can't have this uncertainty. And so there's this initiative that ourselves and other players in the industry are putting forth, which is to create much more exciting blocks, really. And the way it works is that when trades are broadcasted or are sent to the RPC, effectively, we put those immediately into blocks, and then we basically broadcast that state back to the whole community. So instead of this purgatory where the trades just sit there and you kind of wait, basically within every 50 milliseconds, you're getting like a new state or a new picture of Ethereum. And so this happens every, 50 milliseconds, and then we call these real-time pre-confirmations. And so from a user experience perspective, again, Ethereum, large, diverse blockchain, but it's incredibly slow with 12-second latency. Now that comes down to 50 milliseconds. So already it's 240 times faster. We can get from 50 down to maybe 20 milliseconds over the coming year or so. So again, we'll be 1,000 times faster than Ethereum is just today, right? And so we see two parts of Ethereum scaling rapidly this year. One is the number of transactions you can get in collective within the block. As in, if you think of it like a barrel of gas, it's like a bigger barrel of gas, but in terms of the latency as well. So it'll be scaling kind of the volume probably about 10, 15 times this year, and the latency will be scaling at about 100 to 200 times. So ultimately, this brings to agents, the speed and that execution certainty that you're looking for. Now, there's other things that agents can do, and this is we call this like a just-in-time insurance. So when most people, again, when you land a trade on Ethereum, your trade is out there and people can do things with it. But what happens if there's an actor who wants to do something bad with it? And so there's a number of hacks in the space. The Bybit, one of the larger exchanges, had a big hack last year. But it's possible to actually prevent these hacks from happening within a just-in-time model. And so effectively an agent can buy or create these insurance contracts to insulate themselves and everyone else over the entire kind of transaction pipeline. And so this is one of the types of things that people can do. Another thing is mitigate risk. And so this comes back to my TradFi days, where essentially, when the traditional financial markets close on a Friday and news happens, the markets don't trade until Monday, right? So you have this 2-day latency or 2-day exposure. Now, Ethereum, of course, we've managed to compress that down to 12 seconds, but we refer to this as an event risk or a gap risk. But effectively, to eliminate shocks to the ecosystem or systemic shocks, now these shocks will start to happen far, far less, because basically pricing will adjust in real time no matter where you are in the world. And so as we can reduce the latency effectively, there should be far less shocks, is what I'm saying from a financial standpoint. I really sped through this presentation. This is my second last slide, but where we are in terms of timeline is that, we have about 5% of the network testing this already. And so we've shown that Ethereum can indeed process far, far more transactions per block. Towards the end of this year, we estimate 20–30% of Ethereum will be ready to go from a real-time perspective. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be scaling the number of transactions, not just the speed as well, this year. For those of you that are here next week, we have a session with Bitmine, if you guys are familiar with the big DAT, where we'll be talking about scaling this from an institutional perspective as well. So how do you create an environment where institutional players or regulated players are able to come on chain and not get front run or manipulated? And so there we go. That's it. So a faster, more predictable Ethereum for agentic finance. My name's Kevin Lepsoe from ETHGas, and thank you for having me. That's kind of it. I think we'll wait for the next speaker. That was a bit quick. But I'll take any questions in the meantime. Sure.
Have order flow auctions and thank you. Yeah, so how does this relate to the current system of PBS and the way that order flow auctions or things like that would typically fill up that kind of 12-second time period? How would that affect
yeah, so good question. So you have basically, we're talking about the block production process on Ethereum. So you have validators who propose the blocks, you have relays that propagate or distribute, and block builders as well. So this is a parallel process and potentially a competing process to that. The current process for argument's sake, is quite extractive and manipulative, right? Like you have this tunnel or this highway that's getting larger and safer and faster, yet you have this like gatekeeper, or set of gatekeepers at the front that just extract from anyone that wants to get in there. So this is about creating financial market infrastructure that kind of bypasses that. So how do we set up a system that's more fair, that doesn't have front running, doesn't have manipulation, and can just let people through the gates as fast as possible, as opposed to letting like just the good-looking people or whoever pays the most to get through. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes, over here. That's fine.
A really stupid question. In the 12-second period, if in the first second and the 12th second the state of the block changes, what do you do?
Sure. So within this context, the state is changing continuously throughout the block. And what happens at the end of the block is we basically package it all together. We call these subslots or subblocks. We basically package these all together into a single block, which the validator then proposes onto Ethereum. And so conventionally, you would wait 12 seconds. Here, we're almost like an intermediary. And we would be able to provide these confirmations 99.99% of the time. Maybe that 0.1, there's infra is offline or something. So it's not a hard confirmation, but it's pretty good. But yeah, effectively, the state is recorded and updated accordingly over time, and all the ordering is, honored in that process.